11,000 abandoned projects. I'm sure he did not avert his mind to the number of abandoned projects in NDDC. NDDC has almost 13,000 abandoned projects. So when you add, you may be hitting about 30 to 28,000 or so. And what Senator Jus Okalo is saying is the belief of all Nigerians. Most of these projects came through debts, came through loans. So we are still paying the counterpart funding, the indebtedness. We are still paying interest on the loans that we obtained to do these projects, and yet the projects are abandoned. I haven't seen any single federal government project in my area that is functional. The Aluminium Smelter Company of Nigeria, from legal perspective and others, is in shutters. Then we have the paper mill. The paper mill at Akpabio was also a big one, and today that place is just abandoned. In fact, when I went to Aluminium Smelter Company, I was shocked to see embedded 690 megawatts of electricity shut in for over 12 years. The turbines were brand new, and they were complete. So if you put them on, you can have 690 megawatts. At that time, my state did not need up to 90 megawatts. Abia State did not need more than 100 megawatts. Cross River did not need more than 70 megawatts. So even if we brought out the 690 megawatts, we could have targeted like 5 states and given them light permanently. There is 24 hours light supply. For 690, the turbines are there in Ikorabasi, owned by the federal government, brand new, installed and not used in the Aluminium Smelter Company of Nigeria. So sometimes we in the Senate and our colleagues in the in the House of Representatives, we are now in charge of the country. And this motion is a reflection of our concern for Nigeria to do things differently. This is a new regime because when you talk in the past, if you advise government too much, you become an opposition. So we are in charge now, and we are bringing this motion for us to take steps, to retrace our steps and do things differently. And it's the right moment. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, as president of Nigeria, is less than 1 year old. He's also very concerned about the way Nigeria was going. We're slowly creeping to the precipice of disaster. We can be using over 90% of our resources to pay interest on loans and to pay interest to settle indebtedness. What will we have for developmental projects? What is the future of Nigeria? So when I looked at the book you gave me before you moved the motion, how mega projects are damaging Nigeria and how to fix it. This was written when you were doing your thesis. And I looked inside, I saw the Godswill Akpabio International Stadium. Started in 2012, completed in 2014, and you scored it in Cambridge as 100% successful project in Africa. And by the grace of Almighty God and by your indulgence, I'm sitting as Senate President. So I'm in a position to talk about projects, commitment and completion. So without, if you have your own, please also mention. Mr. You have one? You can say something. Yes? Dismiss Senator Ibizagba. Make your contribution.
Joseph Okalo. I represent Abia North. Mr. President, in supporting this motion, I will seek your permission to allow me to say one or two things before I sit back. I only want to support the motion raised by Senator Jimo Ibrahim. The 11,556 projects all over Nigeria. We are saying we are going to make cars, we are going to make steel. Like he said last, steel importation takes almost 25, 27% of our foreign exchange because steel are being imported through China and other surrounding countries, Vietnam and so forth, and Russia sometimes. If we don't go back to build Ajokuta, and even the aluminum settlement in Akwa Ibom, very close to my tank farm, in your village there, it cannot, there's no industrialization. We're not going to talk about industrializing Nigeria. We must have the steel fats. All the steel rolling mills in Nigeria, in Katsina, in Jos, in Alaja, everywhere you have the steel rolling mills, are not going to be functional. So Senator Jimmy Ibrahim has brought a very fundamental thing. Let us stop saying we are dying in poverty. We are not dying in poverty because the country can be great if we face reality. The reality is that we can close 1 year budget and don't do any other thing and reactivate those industries to come on stream. If they come on stream, our people will have jobs. People will see where to work. The industrial revolution of Nigeria will kick off. Because without kicking off Ajokuta steel rolling mill and other small rolling mill in Katsina, in Alaja, Jos, and all the rest of them, we're not going to go very far because we are relying every time in importation. You go to China, people tell you China, China, China. Everybody's making China the warehouse of their place. Why don't we make Aba and Newi the warehouse? These boys are manufacturing everything, but they need steel. They cannot get the steel. If we have steel today, there's nothing made in China that cannot be made in Aba. I'm telling you, the rice mill, the solars, everything. Aba people are manufacturing. Some of you are buying solar. You say it's made in China. It's made in Aba. The Aba people are doing AK-47. They manufacture it. That is the truth. Senate President might know, even in Aba, a very border of his village. Those people have been, I was governor, I've arrested them many times. They manufacture these things in their villages. So it's no longer new that we should face the steel revolution. If we don't face it, Mr. President, we are still wasting our time. And you check our debt repayment. The debt repayment is coming on this project. Why would Nigerians be suffering on what's supposed to have been done? We're supposed to convert back our money and build these industries so we stop paying debt repayment on them. Check the interest and every other thing we are doing. So I urge my colleagues to support every bit of item that Senator Ibrahim said this, and we should appeal generously to President Tinubu. Maybe 2026 budget, 2027 budget, we dedicate it to reactivate all these industries. It's our own. We cannot be waiting for people. If we don't do it, we will not move forward. Thank you, Mr. President, for this opportunity.
President, distinguished colleagues, this should...
No. It's not the one. It's actually Senator Olarere was saying information. So I said under what order? Because I think what it should have been point of order, not information.
Yes.
So if you have a point of order, it's different from information. But distinguished Senator Warada, you have
the President recognized me to contribute to the motion, please. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, this should be one of the most celebrated motions brought up by the 10th Senate. Abandonment of projects has become a cankerworm across the strata of governments in Nigeria, local, state, and national. And if you put together the quantum of money that was invested in putting up these projects and the quantum of money as to losses that we get every day because of the abandonment of these projects cannot be comprehended by any normal, rightful sense. And this, if taken care of, will holistically take care of greater percentage of the problems confronting the politics of our polity, the economy of our polity, the sociability of our polity, and everything. Before we moved to this chamber, I had cause to contribute to a motion brought by our sister, distinguished Senator Natasha, where I was emphatic on the issue of Aja Okuta. The real sector is the major driver of every economic development of every polity. And if you look at a few or a number of these abandoned projects, some of them have very key, germane, relevant, and important roles to play in driving the real sector. If our real sector is up and active, problem of unemployment will be solved, insecurity will be adequately taken care of, because nobody can tell me that he or she has reason or reasons to distance insecurity to poverty. They are in bed together. Our GDP, if the real sector is active, our GDP will grow higher than what it is. The naira to dollar exchange will beef up. Naira will be much more strengthened. Because if the real sector is active, you will have much for domestic utilization and much for exportation. And the more we export, the more foreign exchange we generate, and the more we beef up our foreign reserve. Mr. President, as uncommon as we know you to be, this motion should be giving all the needed support. Talking about Aluminium Smelter Company, in my younger days, an extended uncle of mine was an executive director in Aluminium Smelter. I enjoyed that environment. When there at that time, you think you were not in this part of the world. Today, that is abandoned. Just steel rolling mills contributed to the social and economic atmosphere of Jos Plateau. I am a Josite. I am from Nasarawa State today, but of plateau extraction. I know socially, economically, and otherwise what Jos Steel Rolling Mill was. Talking Katsina rolling mills, of course, it added to the social growth and development of Katsina State. The lack of functionability of Katsina steel rolling mills is part of the reason of the high insecurity in Katsina State. Because the youth, there is virtually nothing of federal presence or vehicle to employ the teeming youth in Katsina. And so, if we are really and truly committed to providing employment for our teeming youth in Nigeria, and as well as committed to grow our GDP, committed to taking Nigeria to the level that it deserves based on the endowment of Nigeria, this motion should be supported by all without any reservation. Senator Jimo Ibrahim, I commend you. I have always read, I have always known that you went to Cambridge, but it is today that I'm confirming you went to Cambridge. Thank you, distinguished colleagues.
Thank you.
My name is Jide Ikwishagba, representing Ondo North Senatorial District. I stand to support the motion from Senator Jimo Ibrahim in various areas, which I'm going to be specific concerning one area out of this support. One, I wouldn't know precisely the source of his own data for arriving at that one. I want to believe he must have gone through serious research. But one thing that we have to understand here is that project abandonment, infrastructure decay, in whatever level we can look at it, is the same. Whether from local government or from the state or the national level. What happened at the local government could be a miniature of the state. Now, why am I saying this? Is that when you look at his motion, we have to also talk about the solution at the cost of that abandonment or infrastructure decay. One of it is continuity in project management. From our own, we have to start looking at it from charity begins at home. Go to your senatorial district. You will find out that at the end of every tenure of any senator here, he must have embarked on projects because he wants to start a fresh project. They will abandon the project that is in place in that senatorial district. This is part of project abandonment, which I believe Senator Jimo Ibrahim wouldn't have taken account of that one when he was doing his research. So, Mr. President and my distinguished colleagues, I want us to look inward into that when we have projects in our various senatorial districts and another senator, your predecessor, who was working on a project before, by one way or the other, he leaves the position. We have to consider it. One thing here is that we don't even take report or account of what projects are in each senatorial district where we are living. And what can we do? We start with our own fresh project because we want to shine off. So, Mr. President and my distinguished colleagues, I want us to look at the aspect of continuity in project as part of a way of resolving project decay or project abandonment. Thank you very much.
Yes, I discovered that whenever a new local government chairman comes, he wants to start his own project. He will abandon even the headquarters of the local government, even at lintel level. He will go and start fresh groundbreaking ceremony. And he said for what? He said for local government headquarters. Then you ask what of the other one? He said no, if he finishes it, they will count it for the former chairman. So nobody really owns anything. Heathrow Airport was constructed for 25 years. You cannot say it was this particular prime minister that did it. It belongs to the good people of the United Kingdom. So I think there has to be a major reorientation of political office holders to know that projects are meant for the people, not necessarily meant for themselves. So you are right. Any senator that has abandoned projects of a previous senator in a senatorial district should start from there. Go back, take a look at those things, and then complete them, particularly if they are of benefit to the people, and not start your own afresh, as if there is no continuity. This is a very, very important motion. Senator Issa Jibrin, let's have a solution
Yeah.
Can ad hoc committee alone unravel the mystery behind 11,000 plus projects? Or do we unpick some of the projects that we want them to look into? Because if we just say 11,000, even in the next 5 years, they may not finish going around the 11,000 projects. So maybe we should look at, we should select major projects and then give it to an ad hoc committee to look into. But because if we want to take the entirety of the 11,800 projects, I think it might be a big problem before the administration ends.
Thank you. They partially spoken my mind. Okay? The rationale behind this abandonment, like we all know, is funding. These projects are still relevant. But as it is today, I doubt if the federal government can revive all these projects at the same time. My suggestion is that we should look at these projects, x-ray them, look at those that have competitive return, that have potentials for competitive return on investment. That is by way of revenue generation. That is by way of revenue generation. Those ones should be isolated and handed over to the Bureau of Public Enterprises for outright sale or concession to private investors. That is my suggestion.
Lagos, in Ikoyi, beautiful structure, federal secretariat, abandoned for many years. After billions have been sunk in, what do we do with such a structure? Because, it's not abandoned. What is it?
It's abandoned.
There's a legal tussle from the person that was given the offer of purchase with Lagos State government. There's a legal tussle on it. It's not an abandoned project. The Obasanjo administration sold it to somebody.
So how many years now?
Well, that is.
How many years?
Then is the court you.
How many years now? A simple question.
They are in court.
How many years now?
80 years.
Huh?
18.
You know, how many years now? Huh? So if in 18 years, the child is concerned, that is an abandoned place. So we will not be able to settle out of court or find a solution. So in the next 50 years, what do you think will happen to the integrity of that project? What do you think will happen to the integrity of that structure? So I understand what you are saying. We are talking about abandonment, whether by way of legal tussle or by way of incoherent completion or by way of lack of payment. It's an abandonment.
Well, sir, Your Excellency, government in, government out to always complete projects that they meet. Because, for instance, the National Library now, if you go back to that National Library to complete it today, it cannot meet up the state-of-art functionality of e-libraries around the world. Because when it was designed, when it was built for the normal, conventional library purpose. So I'm supporting his motion that we should also look for a deterrent in our books, whereby when projects are being conceived, it should be stated that government in, government out, some of these projects must be completed. Thank you, sir.
I see you running up and down the aisle. I remember the first day I saw you there, I said, are we going to have peace? So if you are going up and down here now, we have to return you to somewhere inside. But you speak after Senator Ashiru.
Yes. Not that Yorkshire Grove. Senator Ashiru, representing my people in Kwara South. I want to lend my total support to this motion. And more than anything, to try to address a way out. When Professor Chima mentioned 11,866 projects, I have a very serious doubt whether we are talking about is not a multiple of this figure. Number one, he was referring to investigation made in 2011. We are in 2024, 13 years after. So many projects have been done, and very, very more had equally been abandoned. And when you look at the projects we are talking about, they probably run throughout the strata of our life. And I have the feeling that tackling this means that almost all senators of Federal Republic must be involved. What I mean by that is it is important for us to revert back to various committees. There are so much under the Committee of Housing, because I think in 2019, I did a study of abandoned projects, housing, which happened to be one of those ones mentioned by Senator Salih Mustafa. I understand from the perspective of our study, more than 5 trillion naira could be made by the sale of abandoned projects under housing and property only. So by the time you look at the totality of this, you discover that there are a lot of recoverables that federal government can make from instituting a process, either to complete, to sell, or whatever form, or to recover, even from the contractors. So I'm trying to suggest that all committee chairmen and deputy should do a critical study of abandoned projects under their purview and try to provide a solution. I mean, they will do the study, try to provide a solution on way forward on this project. Mr. President, I am very confident that if this is done as a major assignment of the Senate, we will save Nigeria from a lot of financial peril. I so submit, Mr. President.
Yes, there's a Senator.
Olalere, I represent Osun West Senatorial District in Osun State.
Yes.
Sir, I just want to remind the Senate that around late July, when we started, this was one of the first issues you raised yourself, the concern about the preponderance of so many projects abandoned in Nigeria. And at the end of that discussion that day, a very powerful committee was set up under the chairmanship of Senator Yahya Abdullahi, I remember vividly. And you asked all the senators to bring forth all the abandoned projects in their senatorial district so that they can prepare a compendium of those abandoned projects and bring them to the plenary for us to discuss, and from where we come to suggest to the government which one to be taken every year so that we continue to reduce them. I just want to remind us that we have discussed this issue earlier, but we have not taken any decision on them. So this is one way. It is a common thing, but the Senate must act fast. If not, we are going to be adding more to these abandoned projects every year. As from next year, during the 2025 budget, the Senate should pick some priority ones and discuss with the executive so that they will start working on them from this year. As you submitted, Mr. President.
Thank you. So you add that as part of the IAS committee should immediately submit their report to the Senate to enable us to take action. Senate Leader. So we go into the prayers. Or you want to make a contribution?
Well, I want to join the rest of our colleagues in thanking distinguished Senator Jimo Ibrahim for bringing this. I'm also persuaded by the reasoning of distinguished Senator Ashiru, the Deputy Majority Leader, that truly were we to actually thoroughly look into all the issues of abandoned projects, the number will be much higher than what was even quoted in the motion. However, what is important is for us to be able to get to the bottom of this. With due respect, sir, I am convinced that we need more than an ad hoc committee to do this. Yes, the deputy minority leader hinted that at the beginning of the 10th Senate, we touch on this issue. But I also want to bring it back to our memory that then it was only with respect to abandoned road projects. But this motion is more comprehensive. It will include road projects, it will include housing projects, and other similarly situated projects aimed at infrastructural development of our country. So, what I would like to suggest is that today, the Senate should actually set up an ad hoc committee that will be saddled with the responsibility of distilling the projects that need to, the abandoned projects that need to be looked into, which is the aim of this motion. We first need an ad hoc committee to distill such projects, after which, in distilling those projects, the committee should also classify them into whether it falls within the housing sector, the works and infrastructure sector, environment, education, the various sectors where these projects were initiated. And having so distilled those projects and the sectors that they fall into, we'll come back to report to the Senate, after which the Senate can now direct or order an investigation using the various substantive committees of the Senate that are responsible or saddled with the responsibility of oversighting those sectors. Because those committees will still also need to liaise with the various agencies of government, that are responsible for those sectors. So I believe that what we need to have today is an ad hoc committee that will help to distill the relevant projects in terms of the sectors to which they belong and the relevant committees of this Senate. I thank you so much, Mr. President.
Prayer 1, set up an ad hoc committee to investigate the number of important projects abandoned across Nigeria in all sectors. Any amendment? You have just amended it.
Well, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues,
That is strongly leadership. Distinguished colleagues, prayer 1 has been amended to say that the Senate should set up an ad hoc committee to distill the thousands of abandoned projects across Nigeria into different sectors and report back to the Senate for further action within 1 month. This has been seconded. Those in support of this decision, say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. I believe that decision should be the singular decision of the Senate for today. The second one, that we recommend appropriate actions to be taken to reduce project abandonment. That will be after the submission of the ad hoc committee report. Those in support that we step this down, say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. So, distinguished Senator Jimoh Ibrahim, I must thank you for painstakingly taking your time to bring this to the fore, and to say that the committee that we are going to set up will have 1 month to get back to us after they've studied your list of 11,800 and something abandoned projects and other abandoned projects in the country since your last study in 2011. And then they will report to the Senate in 1 month, sector by sector, with recommendations on the ones that could be disposed of, on the ones that could be done, and the ones that have legal impediments, which we could draw the attention of the Attorney General of the Federation, and also the ones that we think can fetch Nigeria substantial amounts if they are sold, if they are disposed of. And so at the end of the day, we can now say, yes, we have taken the right decision, but how then can we stop further abandonment of projects in Nigeria? And that it brings us to the issue of project management and project consultancy, project conception, and all that. And even then, they should also look at, recommend that some of the projects, if they've stayed for too many years, may require integrity tests so that we don't end up going to complete a building that will end up collapsing as a result of the fact that they have been abandoned for so many years. But on the whole, on behalf of the 10th Senate, we thank you for this motion. We assure you that we'll do justice to it, to bring this issue to, not, it's possible not to an end, but to minimize very seriously at all strata of government, from the federal government to the state and to the local government. And then we also will make money from these abandoned projects for the benefit of all Nigerians. Thank you, my distinguished brothers, for your contributions. Having come to the end of our deliberations, in Nigeria, and we had not yet consulted our colleagues on some of the other key issues. So I believe strongly that we should adjourn to Tuesday next week, and if there is need for us to observe the first anniversary, you'll be communicated. Even we can communicate to you without necessarily coming to chambers, but we should at least come back here on Tuesday with a view to communicating to you in case you need to go to your various states to observe the first anniversary celebration of this current administration. But as distinguished senators of the Federal Republic, our job is at the federal level. So the committee to handle this, ad hoc committee to handle this particular issue of distilling the projects, over 18,000 of them, bringing back the report to the Senate and advising the Senate on the way forward, sector by sector, on the issue of abandoned projects will consist of the mover of the motion, Jimo Ibrahim, distinguished Senator Yahya Abdullahi, distinguished Senator Laura Ashiru, distinguished Senator Victor Ome, distinguished Senator Issa Jibrin, distinguished Senator Goje, and distinguished Senator Barina Mbigi, Chairman of Works. And the chairman of that committee will be the deputy leader, distinguished Senator Laura Ashiru, to report back to the Senate in 1 month. Shortly after this, we really ought to have received the United Arab Emirates ambassador to Nigeria and the delegation in room 301 of the Senate President's conference room. So the chairman and vice chairman and Senate committees on foreign affairs and other distinguished senators are invited to join. A delegation of the Embassy of the People's Republic of China, also led by the ambassador, Mr. Zhang Yi, is also, okay. I didn't say Zangjim Pam or the Azam, but I'm sure they are also waiting for us. It will be at the same venue. So we must, from here, we are almost.
Your Excellency, the President of the Senate, my very most distinguished colleagues of the Senate of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. My name is Jimo Ibrahim Foloronsho. I represent the good people of Ondo South. I rise, distinguished colleagues, on the motion for urgent need to look into 11,886 abandoned federal government projects in Nigeria. The Senate notes that in 2011, President Goodluck Jonathan set up a presidential committee on federal government abandoned projects in Nigeria. The committee visited 30 states of the Federation, including Abuja, and identified 11,886 projects abandoned by the federal government since Nigeria independence in 1960. Distinguished colleagues, also note that according to the report, that constitute about 63% of the entire project since independence were abandoned. Even when a project is successfully delivered, you all know, it usually comes with an overrun cost of 40%, while most deliverable projects record 10% underperformance. And here we have 11,886 projects abandoned. The Distinguished colleagues, Mr. Senate President, further notes that the 63% of projects abandoned in Nigeria is terrible, that is worse than any other country under comparison. The abandonment of the projects is of significant concern because of project costs, which constitute a significant part of our gross domestic product, GDP. While spending on public projects in the UK is now around £1 trillion, Nigeria do not have an idea of the total amount of money spent on public projects, either successful or unsuccessful, since independence in 1960. Distinguished colleagues, observe that cost overrun and benefit shortfall over and over again of projects in Nigeria is important. For instance, in the investigation carried out at the University of Cambridge Doctoral in Management Science between 1981 and 2022, the value of 38 projects investigated cost Nigeria $40 billion. What is now key to this investigation is the need to look inward for our infrastructural development, as foreign direct investment declined from 8.8 billion in 2011 to negative 17 billion. And the current account balances in that year was 10.6 billion, and then it came down to negative 17 billion, as I said. While the population of Nigeria was growing as at that time with about 5%, 86% of citizens were living under $2, Mr. Senate President, in 2011 and 2019. Public debt rose from 17% of the GDP to about 29% in 2019, and this is very, very worrisome. Also observe, distinguished colleagues, that government has responsibility to set up professional system that would deliver the critical value from major infrastructural development for a citizen. And for 66% of projects to be abandoned since 1960 is nothing less than a calamity, and that reduces our pride as giant of Africa if we are still one. And every stakeholder should be concerned with giving support for a legitimate solution, while the government have the responsibility to act, Mr. Senate President. Let me also say that it is now the case that 3 abandoned projects out of the 11,886 projects are over 30% of our national debt. For instance, the Ajakuta will spend $10 billion, without producing any steel. That amount was spent. Any production, needless to say, or talk about Shopee, we spent $4.5 billion on Shopee. Mr. Senate President, as you call it, nobody knows the address of Shopee as I speak. We don't know where they address it for a project that took $4.6 billion. Same as Second Niger Bridge. The Second Niger Bridge is a 5-phase project. Only one phase we are battling with. 4 phases were completely neglected. Recall, distinguished colleagues, Mr. Senate President, Your Excellency, that products like National Library, we all see National Library as you go home in Abuja here by the side of the road. $386 billion have been spent on that library. It's at the 4th floor out of 13 floors. Lagos Badagry Express Road comes to mind readily. Calabar Power Plant, 7 zones of Calabar Power Plant were supposed to be completed. When President Jonathan opened 2 of it, by the time he returned to Abuja, they were all closed down. Zuguri Dam, where we collected money from a Chinese bank, Exim Bank, well over $2 billion have been collected, and I speak with you, we are still battling with it. Malabi site, yeah, we all know about Malabi site, and as a matter of fact, well over $4.6 billion is before arbitration right now when nothing happened at the site. Otopo Dam is another well-abandoned project for my colleagues that comes from Benue State. Satellites, we understand one of the satellites was lost in orbit. Mr. Senate President, we expect that the insurance company is supposed to pay for that satellite that was launched and lost. One was successful, second satellite was lost. Now, NITEL and many of them that we can see, Calabar Seaport, Abuja Mass Housing Project, erosion took away 25% of the entire site and the project abandoned. To mention just a few out of 11,000 projects that are abandoned. Note, Mr. Senate President, that project abandonment is a syndrome to national development, particularly when it is centered around basic infrastructure, as over 63% of the federal government projects have been abandoned since independence in 1960. Regret, Mr. Senate President, that the implication of the very many abandoned projects could be seen on the economic practically as the direct investment decline from 8.8 billion in 2011 to 3.3 billion in 2019. And the current account balances in that year from 10.6 billion to negative 17 billion. And that is where the federal government is having a lot of problems right now because of all of this negative decline. Why the population, our population, is growing at 5% according to World Population Center, about 66% of citizens are living under $2. I don't even know whether that is $2 now because dollar has gone to 1,400. So $2 will be 2,800. I don't know 86% can afford to have 2,800 per day to feed. Between 2001 and 2019. Now, public debt has also gone up by 17% of the GDP in 2001. It used to be 27 billion debt. Now we're having 77 billion debt. And as of that year, in 2019, it has increased to 29% of the entire economic size. And, Mr. President, this is very, very, very embarrassing. Now conclude, very distinguished colleagues for time, that about 11,000 projects have been abandoned by the federal government since independence, according to the Presidential Committee on Abandoned Projects set up by the President Jonathan as at that time. In the case of Ajakuta alone, one project, $10 billion. If we have a debt of $76 billion, Mr. Senate President, $10 billion is about 15% of entire debt, from one project out of 11,000 projects. And let me round up by saying that it is not the case that we never had a successful project. At least Goswin Akpabio project was very successful in Akwa Ibom. It is not that we don't know how to do it, but how we have 11,000.
Please take that again, please.
I said, my distinguished colleagues, Your Excellency, Mr. Senate President, it is not the case that Nigeria doesn't know how to do successful projects. For example, the Godway Akpabio Stadium in Akwa Ibom is a successful project, deliver on time, on cost, and to benefits. But what we have in this 11,000 projects that are abandoned, Mr. Senate President, is cost overrun, benefit shortfall, and over and over again. This Senate have responsibility to look at this abandoned project and at least, get a conclusive document to give to the executive to implement. Because every day when the budget comes here again, we have project coming up. Accordingly, resolve, Mr. Senate President, 1, set up ad hoc committee to investigate the number of important projects abandoned, across Nigeria and in all sectors of the economy. And as a matter of fact, the second prayer, Mr. Senate President, is recommend appropriate action to be taken to reduce project abandonment in Nigeria, and how most of those projects can be retrieved or recovered. For example, if we don't need a national library, then why don't you sell it and use it to build the other project that you abandoned? If our Jakarta is still costing $10 billion, now we still have to spend more money. Where the green field costs $1.2 billion, what can we do with that site? Because as I speak with you, Mr. Senate President, and I'm happy that the former Senate President is here, the Ninth Senate allocated 5 billion naira for the payment of workers in Jakarta. And what are they doing there? $10 billion have been spent on that project, and we have not produced any steel. Lastly, I want to bring to your attention, Mr. Senate President, that iron importation is 25% of cash position of our budget. Iron importation is 25% of cash element of our budget. Now, every building you build is 30% iron component. We still import iron. We can't produce iron, and we have 10 billion spent on one project. Very distinguished colleagues, I want to thank you for your attention and for time taking. Mr. Senate President, thank you very much. I so move. Thank you, sir.
Let's listen to